Well, welcome everyone to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, 3PGC, is a non-profit organisation committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. And our guest speaker today is Judy Nahkies from New Zealand. So just a little bit about Judy. Judy suffered from depression, anxiety, and suicidal thinking for decades before stumbling across the three principles in early 2016. And suddenly life made sense. The impact was immediate and profound, and yet there was more to come. As her understanding deepened, Judy experienced a level of grace and ease with the ups and downs of life that she couldn't have ever previously imagined. Judy has a Bachelor of Agricultural Sciences and worked in research for 10 years before becoming a stay-at-home mum. She studied nutrition and lifestyle factors associated with well-being, and more recently has studied with some of the best in the three principles. Most recently, qualifying as a Rewilding guide with Rohini and Angus Ross. Judy is passionate about sharing what she's learned with individuals and groups. She enjoys watching clients' stories and labels dissolve as they start to see who they are beyond their thinking. Judy lives in New Zealand on a 50-acre farm. She loves animals and nature, especially horses. And that brings us to Judy's topic of her talk today, which is Thomas's gift, seeing the neutrality of circumstances. Thank you so much, Judy.
Oh, thank you, Justine. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. When I first came across the principles, it made a massive difference for me, but I had a lot of yeah buts. And one of them was this idea that circumstances are neutral, because I would look around the world and see so many tragic things and think, no, don't tell me that's neutral. That's just a load of rubbish. And then one day I got to see it really deeply for myself. We had this beautiful stallion that we owned in partnership, and my daughter had trained him since he was a 4-year-old through to Grand Prix show jumping, which is the highest level of show jumping. And sadly, she'd become too old to ride him, and we'd leased him out. And then this happened, I think, within a year of me coming across the principles. And I got a call to say that Thomas had been badly injured. And there was, the co-owner, and she was like, it's okay, but we're just going to take him through to Canterbury Equine Vets just to make sure he gets the best care possible. And there's a part of me that I just knew that something wasn't ringing true. And despite being told by the vets in the early days that he would make a full recovery, a couple of days went by and they said, well, we want to do some exploratory surgery. And then I got the call, and the call said, the damage is so bad, we don't even want to wake him up. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like all thought dropped out of my mind. And I just felt in this void that was certainly new to me, that I didn't have a massive response. And in that space, I rang my husband and let him know what had gone on. And afterwards, I sort of wandered out onto the deck. And as I sat there, it was a beautiful sunny day. And I sort of gazed out over the garden, and I suddenly noticed that I had a lot of different thoughts coming, and it felt like I had this whole big smorgasbord of thoughts, and each thought had its own individual feeling. There was the, oh my God, how am I going to tell my daughter? And that came with a real hit. And there'd been difficulties in the partnership, and there was the, oh, well, at least when this is over, I won't have to have so much to do with those people. And there was the, oh, it's so sad that the world never really got to see him at his best. only the people that we trained with, because he'd got injured and Melissa hadn't really got to have the level of success that I felt that she deserved, and that came with a different thought. And so there were all these different thoughts and feelings, and then suddenly I had this other thought, this new one that was, oh my God, circumstances really are neutral. This proves it. And ever since then, I kind of think of it as Thomas's gift to me. And it's not to say that I didn't have a lot of sadness at times and tears and grieving. And yeah, it was a massive loss in our life. And there were a lot of other things around that. One of the other parts of it that kind of blew my mind too is that when I first got the news, I think it was because I just knew there was more to the story than I was being told. I said something a bit unfortunate, and my daughter sort of took exception to what I'd said. And when I first told her the news, she said something pretty nasty back to me in relation to what I'd said. And the beautiful thing with this understanding is that I just knew that it was coming from pain. And it just didn't matter, and it never had any impact on me. It was like water off a duck's back. And it's amazing how many times since that time, I've had really pretty awful things happen. And yet in the moment, it's like all thought drops away and I just know what to do. I know what to say. And it just blows my mind that, we're built to have this wisdom, and the only thing that ever takes us away from it is our own stirred up thinking. And I can still go there, believe you me. I still have massive reactions at times. And I was commenting actually before the recording started. Some of you that know me well might notice that my face is a bit more red than normal. And I think that my body has been telling me that you're a bit more stirred up about this than you might think. I thought I've been relatively calm, but I seem to have either had a massive allergic reaction to something, or I suspect might be the case that my body just thinks it needs to step in and tell me, you're pretty stirred up. You better settle down. It's going to be really interesting. I'm curious to see what's going to happen after this talk, to see, does it settle down on its own? Will it take a few days, or will I actually feel better afterwards? So that's kind of my story about Thomas. And I feel so grateful to have seen that, because I just know that in any moment, in any situation, there's always more available to me than I can perhaps see in the moment. But we tend to see more of whatever we focus on. And sometimes my focus is really, really narrow because I'm so caught up about this particular thing. But I know that if I can kind of step back a little bit, settle down, there's going to be more for me to see. So I'm conscious that I was actually meant to take the first 15, 20 minutes, and I feel like I'm a bit speeded up. I've sort of shot through that. But I'd just like to invite anybody that wants to join the conversation, to maybe share something that they've seen for themselves around this topic, or to ask a question. And I'm thinking, if nobody's got any questions or comments, I might just go ahead and start sharing some of the other insights I've seen that have been really helpful to me. One of the other big things is the idea that the future's an unpredictable equation, that we're never going to know how we're going to react or how we'll feel in the moment until we're in the moment. And that in itself has just taken so much off my mind. And I got to see this really deeply for myself when I'd actually had a colleague staying with me from Scotland, and she'd agreed to host a webinar, and I'd managed, well, actually it was an in-person afternoon, and I'd managed to get about 20 people to come along to this workshop. And I thought that that was going to be the basis of an ongoing 3 principles and group in Christchurch, which is relatively near to where I live. And I was so excited that I was going to have other people to talk to about all this stuff. And I, booked a venue. I arranged the first meeting, and I showed up to the meeting and nobody came. Now, I would have expected to be a little bit disappointed at least. And actually, if I was being really honest, I would have expected to be a bit devastated that nobody came. But at the time, I just didn't care. And that really surprised me. And I sort of drove home and, oh, well, nobody came. It doesn't really matter. And then the next day I was as part of a 3 principles group that I was doing with Molly Gordon. I was telling her all about it. And I suddenly found myself get really emotional about it and end up in tears. And I'm like, what? This is really strange. I was fine about this yesterday. How come I'm stirred up today? And yeah, that was when I really saw deeply, we can't know how we're going to react until it is the moment. And however we react is fine. And I remember someone saying to me afterwards, there's a flaw in your understanding if you have different reactions at different times. But to me, that's just an example of separate realities. We can experience the same thing many times over, and we have a different experience of that thing. Now I'm starting to wonder if I'm even making sense. Is there anyone that would like to comment on that?
Yeah, you're making sense to me, Judy. It's Justine here.
Oh,
recently there was a situation, and I was upset about it, and I wanted to kind of take action that, in my caught up thinking seemed like a really good idea. And then I think I just, then something occurred to me, and I knew that I just needed to kind of slow down and just put it aside. And then I was cleaning the house, and it just came to me a different way to approach the situation. And just in that moment, I saw something new, and it felt so much better, such a better way to address the situation that I wanted to address in some way. So yeah, the same situation within moments took on a different reality to me, let alone however another person might have been seeing it. So yeah. This understanding has been amazing in that regard for me. Yeah.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Because there's so much hope, because your whole experience can change with one new thought. And yeah, it's something that I often laugh. It's kind of like hidden in plain sight, but we don't see it until we see it. And it really helps to have, people share their insights and see, and then we might be more likely to notice it for ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, that just reminds me too, it's so how many times I want to plan ahead, or I think about something that's bothering me and how I'm going to fix it or what I need to do next. And there's just all that ruminating and planning. And it's just my mind, right? Trying to keep things in control or help me out. And, but it's just that reminder that all I can do is take one action in this moment and then release that to the, I don't know, the universe, and see what comes next, and to trust that what I need will be there and it'll come to me. And yeah, that reminder to trust and let go.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
I just find that, yeah, life has become more simple and easier most of the time, and there's still times that are difficult. I don't think that's ever going to change. Like, after all, as Sid said, life's a full contact sport. Things happen. And, do I always do the, I often still have hindsight and think about, oh, I could have said this, or I should have done that. But I'm also pretty quick to let go of it, because I know that, having that kind of thinking is just going to make me feel bad. And actually, to be honest, I don't have to let go of it so much. It feels like it lets go of me. It just doesn't interest me in the way that it used to. I used to be I was so busy listening to compelling, urgent thinking and acting on that. And now I see that the information is in the feeling, and the feeling tells me whether I should take any notice of the thinking. And that's made a huge difference in my life. Does anybody else have a story that they'd like to share, or a question?
Miss Judy, are you able to hear me?
I can, Monique.
Oh, beautiful. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the story you just shared, just in regards to how you navigated. Well, I love that you shared your excitement that you had found the three principles and you were gung-ho and you were ready. You went and rented a hall and you just really wanted to share what you know, and your heart is still right there. And it's ironic that you went to the hall and no one showed up, and that meant nothing to you. That's beautiful, because it again just lines up with what we're talking about here, of just ensuring that we don't have to make anything out of the fact that something happened. Can you still hear me? Yeah, I love that. I love
yeah,
that.
we can.
In that moment, you sat in that moment, and it meant nothing. It just was like, oh, okay, no one showed up. And it didn't stop anything, because you still continue on, you still share your beautiful stories. And I really like that. I really like how in the three principles, we get to observe our thinking. And then because we're aware, it takes us to higher vantage points. And then things that used to be so important are not that important anymore, because we don't, put the urgency on them. I like that word, urgency. So thank you for sharing. I loved your share.
Oh, thank you, Monique. It is amazing how often I'm totally surprised by my reaction, because it's just not what I would have used to do. And it's beautiful to kind of watch it unfolding. I think the first time I got to see that really deeply for myself was when I was feeding the horses one morning. And I'd driven to the far end of our farm, and we only have about 50 acres, so it's not all that far. But I'd got there and I realized that I'd forgotten to put the buckets on the trailer. And I drove off back to the barn and picked up the buckets, and I went back and I fed the horses. And it wasn't until I'd finished feeding them that I suddenly realized how effortless and easy that was. And the difference was that in the past, I would have absolutely berated myself for being so useless and stupid to leave the buckets behind. And at some level, I used to think that that would stop me from making the mistake the next time. If I gave myself a hard enough time, if I yelled at myself in my head, or actually, to be honest, often, before the principles, I would have been yelling at myself out loud. And I was abusive to myself. I would never have talked to anybody else the way that I would talk to myself. And in that moment, I got to see how easy it was. It only took me a few extra minutes. It really didn't matter. But I was so determined to be efficient and productive that I had this gold standard for myself that was super high. And how dare you be inefficient? If I was, there was a price to pay, and that was me abusing myself. And I love that I can notice things like that. And it's not that I set out to not do it. I just noticed that, oh my goodness, I didn't do that thing that I always used to do. And there's so many shifts in my life that I've had, similar to that, where there hasn't been any massive insight. I just noticed that life is easier. I'm kinder to myself, more gentle, and it's just been a beautiful unfolding that. And it's interesting, actually, because at times I get really, because I've gained a lot, it's like, well, oh, maybe I'll do this program or that program, or I better go and listen to this webinar, because there's always going to be more to see. There's certainly things that I want to see more around. But what I also notice is that it's always unfolding for me, and I get to see little things all the time. And pretty much all of my big insights, they've just happened as I've gone about my life. They haven't been in, during a coaching session where someone's been coaching me, or it kind of shifts on its own, and we have the insight that we need to have when we need it. If we can just, I want to say, get a little bit quiet, but even that's not completely true to me, because I can have insights happening all the time, even when I'm really stirred up. The difference now is that I'm more likely to notice them. And I think back actually to, when I look at, before the principles, the insights were always there. I just didn't take any notice of them, because they didn't come with the urgent, compelling feeling that, that was what I would listen to. If it came with, kind of a nothingness, I didn't think it was important. Or it might look like a good idea, but I'd soon forget it.
Judy, Felicity here.
Oh, hi, Felicity.
Hello, in Auckland. Sorry, I just popped out from where I am because I'm just was listening, which is all I can do at the moment. But I've just popped out, and just to say, just absolutely lovely listening to what you're saying, because I identify so much with it, and how my thoughts, what I'm doing with my thoughts at the moment, or not doing with them. I just think of one very simple instance this week where I'm still working from home. I've decided to carry on doing that, post-COVID. And I just sat down on my lunch break and was watching a documentary on adoption. And I got terribly emotional about it. I'm not adopted, but I didn't come into the world in sort of the normal way. And it has affected, my life drastically. And I started to cry, which is unusual, and I just thought, oh dear, all this hurt, all this, do I really have to deal with this? What's happening here? And then I just parked it, went back to work and just thought, no, just park it. This is what you're thinking at the moment. And then after work, I thought, I really want to finish listening to that person's story, and okay, we'll just face whatever happens, the way I feel, because it's only thoughts. It's just, they came from nowhere. They came unexpectedly, and I listened to it, and, my emotions were so different, connected to the thoughts that I was having. And again, it's that old saying, this too shall pass. But, it's just watching those thoughts going through, knowing that there's value in them, not ignoring them, but not letting them take hold of me, as they have in the past. Yeah, and just, and I find things around the three principles very hard to put into words, but
Yeah.
which I'm sure a lot of people do, but that doesn't mean that it's, so yeah, still trying to grasp a lot of it. But that's just a simple little thing from this week. Whereas in the past, without sort of the, my study and knowledge of the three principles and trying to put it into practice, I would have been in a place I don't really want to be for longer than 10 minutes, just knowing that it's temporary and things, Anyway, I won't go on any further because
that's lovely.
you feel like you're going around in circles, don't you, sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I need to get back to my little thing that I'm at the moment. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Felicity. It reminds me of a saying I think I heard Linda Pransky say, whereby you can have your thoughts without your thoughts having you. And yeah, I just see that so true. So much more of the time for me than it ever used to be. And I'm so thankful that, I stumbled across the principles when I did, because I hate to think what shape my life would be in if I hadn't. And there's a part of me that even doubts that, because, we're actually really built to handle life. We're built to get over things. And most people do. And it actually takes a lot of effort to hold on to thinking, for a really long time. Eventually, you're most likely going to forget it. I remember someone saying to me, if I was to pay you $1 million if you could think the same thought all day, do you think that you could achieve it? And how often, no matter how hard we concentrate, do we still find ourselves suddenly thinking about something completely different? The river of thought just flows, and we get a new thought constantly.
Judy, I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about, it's Justine here, a little about when you get in a low mood, about taking that lightly as well, or not having to work that out. It's something I've kind of experienced recently, just kind of a lowering. I was in a really great space, and then I started to feel really ordinary, and it's like, no, I don't want that good feeling to go away. But just wondering if you can say a bit about that, because I know that you used to experience anxiety and depression, and that shifted, or the response to that really shifted when you.
Yeah, absolutely it did. I just to give you a wee bit more detail, actually. The day that I stumbled across the principles, I had been in a state for weeks. Like, my daughter had had a head injury a few months previously, and I was pretty messed up about it all. And it's interesting because I could see that I was just starting to get better, and then something else actually happened that I felt like I'd been double stabbed in the back by a couple of friends, and I just couldn't let it go. I fixated and thought about it for for weeks, my anxiety was at the worst it had ever been in my life. It felt like it was all I experienced. I would feel sick from the time I woke up in the morning to when I would go to bed. And I'm sure that that actually wasn't the case. I just didn't notice the times when it was easier. Anyway, I got to the point where I was actually Googling in the middle of the night how to commit suicide so no one knows you've done it. And I didn't find anything that I thought would be viable that might work. So I remember going back to bed after hours of just crying, and I just felt like there was no hope. I had all sorts of therapies and things over my life. I tried all sorts of medications, and I couldn't imagine that it was ever going to be any different. And the very next day I was making myself work in the garden, and I see now that that was my wisdom, that as hard as it was to get started, I would often just make myself go and do it. And I normally would start to feel better because it would just shift. Yeah, if I started focusing on plants, I'm not thinking about what's going on in my head. And it was my habit to listen to stuff as I would do that. And this particular day, whatever I'd selected finished, and YouTube selected Michael Neal for me. And he was talking about super coach. And it was so funny because I was immediately completely resistant because I felt like he was trying to sell me something. And I didn't really want to listen, but I would have selected something else. But there was a reason I couldn't. I was stuck listening. And I'm so grateful that the universe basically gave me no choice. Because what I heard that day completely changed my life. Like, I went inside and I Google searched, and there wasn't much around back in those days. It was 2016, but I found someone's blog and kind of read her thing, and it just, the logic of it just made sense. And I went to bed that night not really giving it much thought, and the next day I woke up and my anxiety was gone, and it so surprised me and it was the first time that I had significant periods of relief. And then occasionally I'd start to feel a wee bit anxious again. But it often would come with you just must have some anxious thinking. And I just cared less about it. And I think what I quickly came to see that was the more comfortable I was experiencing whatever I was experiencing, the more quickly it seemed to pass. So it became, I still have times when I get really caught up and feel low, and I don't want to feel this. I'd rather be feeling that. But I just, the system's going to do what it's going to do. And the more I let it do its thing, the quicker and easier it seems to be. And I noticed that even when there's something that I kind of really want to hang on to, I want to hold a grudge about, maybe, the conditioning part of me might say, oh, no, that's just not right. I find myself getting over that stuff anyway. And it just kind of, the ease, life just becomes more fun. I laugh a lot more now. I cry more too. And I love that I just experience the full range of emotions, and it's all part of the journey. Rohini often would talk about the health in everything. And I see more of that now, like the health. And one of the examples when I saw that was something had been going on with my daughter, actually. And I knew I was a wee bit stirred up about it, but I thought I was pretty okay. And then I found myself just absolutely blowing up at my husband over something really trivial. And it was 10 minutes before I was meant to be jumping on a Zoom call to host in the Zoom room. And I had the thought, oh my goodness, I don't know if you're fit to be hosting other people. And yeah, sometimes that might look important, but I was kind of like, well, I know I can shift in any moment, and as soon as I sit in my chair, I'll be fine. And that was exactly what happened. But I see that, yeah, that the health in it was that me blowing up over something trivial became my warning that you're more stirred up about this than you might think. Because I don't think we're conscious of every thought that we have. I think they estimate that we have maybe 100,000 thoughts a day, 60 to 100,000, I've heard various people say. And I'm certainly not aware of that many thoughts. So there's a lot going on in my subconscious that I have no clue about. And I get to experience the feeling that's associated with that. And that might make me feel a bit down or whatever. But I just know it's going to pass. And the more comfortable I am, you know, being uncomfortable, and it becomes my kind of warning, well, you need to take a bit better care of yourself. And, you know, it's an opportunity to be even kinder and more gentle with myself. And, yeah, it's not a beat myself up and go harder kind of thing. It's take the pressure off yourself, quieten down, allow yourself to settle. Gosh, I'm really conscious I've been talking a lot, and I welcome anyone else to share something or ask a question. I just wanted to comment, Matthew, I noticed a while ago that you unmuted yourself, maybe by accident, and I thought, oh, you were going to say something, but then you didn't.
In fact, that question that Justine asked was what I was wondering too, because she'd introduced you with like having a long history with depression and suicidal thoughts and anxiety, and I was wondering how that shifted, but just something you said then triggered a thought in me too, like because I've wondered about this, you know, like the you know, like your experience has been, it seems like you seem to have big insights. I mean, I'm relatively new to the whole scene, but I seem to, you know, have a bit of conditioning around various things, you know, like I'll give you a trivial example, but it's real. It's, you know, traffic, for example. Like I live in Sydney, and this week we've had rail strikes, you know, public transport, you know, rail and bus. And while I commute in the car, you know, the traffic has just been, you know, horrendous, and, you know, having to do a rat run through the suburbs to just get to work anywhere near on time, you know, like, and I can say, you know, I'm slightly better than I have been in the past. You know, it would drive me crazy, that sort of thing, just waiting forever in traffic and so on. And at times I see it a little bit more along the lines that you've described. Well, you know, there's nothing I can do about it, and, you know, it's my thinking that's making it worse. But you know, it seems to come at me afresh again, you know, this week, because there's more of it, you know, and like every day it's been, oh, what am I going to get today in terms of the traffic? And like I'm often, you know, like watching the news. This is a long sort of, I'd like to hear your thoughts, but, you know, I know that people can view it differently. You know, in the news, they've been interviewing commuters who are using the trains, you know, when the trains aren't coming for hours and they're late for work, and some just are really cool about it. You know, they think, oh, well, the rail workers have got their reasons, it's about safety and blah, 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 it's a good thing. And yet, you know, they'll probably be docked pay because they're an hour late for work or whatever. And I just think, oh, well, I've got none of that, you know, sort of equanimity or neutrality, as you put it, about it. You know, it's just sort of, it feels like a big inconvenience. But
yeah.
Yes. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm sure it is an inconvenience often.
Yeah.
Well, whatever thought that we're giving attention to is going to feel real. It's going to, it's a very convincing illusion. Like, you know, and a story that came to mind actually as you were sharing was Because I used to feel like I don't want these thoughts. My life would be so much easier if I didn't have these thoughts and have to, ignore the thoughts or not taking any notice of the feelings. One of the things that I had actually always struggled with a little was doing my housework. And I noticed that sometimes it was really easy and effortless, and I would just be doing it, and I wanted it to be like that all the time. And one day, as I was, I think I'd fallen asleep on the couch in the evening after dinner, and as I was sort of woke up and I was a bit groggy, and I sort of glanced over at the kitchen bench that still had the dinner dishes on it, and I was about to head up the stairs, and part of me was kind of like, well, I wish I was more motivated to do this housework or something like that. And then I suddenly had the thought that the only thing that's getting in your way is wanting to do it. And you can do it without wanting to. And it's a little bit like that with the thoughts that, I don't want to have these thoughts, but they keep coming. And that feels like at times that it makes life a bit harder. But I don't have to let them have their way with me, if that makes sense. And I just find that, as I see more and more, it just naturally falls away. And there's times I can get completely caught up as well. I think it's always important to share that, because I actually quite like hearing stories about other people when they've been caught up, because it makes it more okay for me to be. And the more okay I am about it, the quicker it seems to be over. It's only when I add judgment to my experience that I suffer more and it lasts longer. So I don't know if there's anything helpful in that, Matthew, but...
No, I get it. I think of the point type, I think there's something in it, because I probably not, I'd like to not be caught up, the drama of the traffic, it is neutral, really, it's got a reason, because there's no public transport, so everyone's in their car, so it's just what it is. But then it's my reaction I don't want. So if I can just accept that, or funk around it or whatever, that probably would make it easier, rather than being sort of upset, I'm upset sort of thing, But anyway, that's to be.
Yeah. Well, sometimes this might sound a bit weird, but sometimes I enjoy my capacity to get really upset about something, which is kind of like, wow, I have such a great imagination. Look how much power this thinking has, and really appreciate the power of the thought in the moment. Like, it can create the most amazing experience for us. I'm reminded of a time when, some of the imaginings that I have, they're so vivid, and I'm living them as if they're actually happening, even when they're not. And that's how we get to enjoy a really good movie. If I couldn't get caught up in my thinking, I probably wouldn't enjoy a movie, because I would be like, oh, that's all made up, it's not even real. But I appreciate that I can get lost as well.
Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. It'd be interesting to see how, if your experience changes in any way.
Hi, Judy, it's Ella.
Hi, Ella.
I would like to add my insights, I guess, around neutrality of events. That it's not only that they're neutral, but they're completely separate from our experience of these events. Like you mentioned, when people didn't show up for your event, your experience of it, which you would expect to have, happened much later. And for me, it was looking back. The realization came when my sister died unexpectedly. I wasn't even grieving when it happened, even though I was with her. I was just thinking what I'm going to tell my mom. She's going to have high blood pressure. She's going to take it really hard. And that's what happened. When I told my mom about it, she had horrible reaction. I was really worried about her, that she's going to die. She had like 240 blood pressure. And now I realize that although it was understandable that she had this reaction, of course you're going to go through this when your daughter dies, but her daughter died 4 hours earlier, and her experience of that happened much later. And also, there's a lot writing, I guess, emotional on grief. Am I grieving too hard? Am I not grieving enough? How come I'm not grieving right now? How come I'm grieving too long, too hard? Why can't I stop crying? And I realized that the energy of grief, the energy of thought, comes in waves, as it's supposed to. And when it comes, you're grieving. And when it leaves, you're not. And it's not wrong to grieve, and it's not wrong not to grieve. When you just allow this energy flow through you, it is not as hard as when you try to fight it and justify it and do something about it. It's actually, looking back, a beautiful experience. And it doesn't really have much to do with the event itself. It is separate. When I just recently had this realization, it was hard for me for a while to accept that all events are neutral, because they can't possibly. But through this experience, through these realizations, I get it. Yes, they are neutral. And we're going to have various experiences of them for a while, or maybe for the rest of our lives. And that's just so comforting, that this is predictable. You are going to have an experience, and you will be experiencing your thoughts, not the event. And you can be at peace with whatever comes through you.
Oh, that's a beautiful example.
I never thought I would be at peace and such a loving experience of my sister there. But now I understand how beautiful it was. I wish I got it 4 years earlier. It's helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Ella. Thanks for sharing that. That's really profound. Does anyone else have something that they would like to share? That I mean, what's coming to mind for me is that oftentimes in the past there would be things I would like to share, but I'd be a bit too scared to share. It would be hard for me to speak up. And if you could have known me, gosh, 20 years ago, I was the person that would struggle to introduce herself to a couple of people. So to imagine myself doing this, I would never have thought that I could do it. But I just want to let people know that, how you feel about the idea of doing it is almost like what Ella was just pointing to, is completely separate from the reality of actually doing it. Like you don't know how you're going to feel about doing it until you actually do it. And you can have any different experience. Like I kind of expected today that my heart would be pounding 20 yards outside of my body, because that's often been my experience when I get stirred up. And that hasn't really happened for me at all today. I got to have a red face instead. And I'm kind of okay about all of it. It was so funny actually, because in the lead up, I was like, how do I disguise my face? Should I try and disguise my face? This is going to be recorded. And my husband said to me, it's not a beauty contest. It's just you sharing. And it doesn't matter. And I'm kind of like, but there's going to be a recording. People will get to see it in the future. And then I realized that it just doesn't matter. So much of what we think matters. It really doesn't. And to get more comfortable about just whatever's going on, I think is a beautiful thing. So what I was actually inviting was that, perhaps there's someone that thinks, oh, I'd really like to share something. And I just want to offer you that opportunity to put your brave pants on and just do it. In spite of your conditioning that might be screaming at you, no, 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 you're not important. What you've got to say isn't important. I invite you to just share. And it could be that nobody's got anything.
Miss Susan had her hand up.
Oh, you did too, Susan. I'm sorry.
So yeah, and my brain is telling me this really isn't important. So
Ignore it.
Yeah. When Ala, when you were talking about grief, what was coming to me is with so my father is getting older, and I sort of live in grief in a lot of different ways with him, where I'm grieving his losses, or I think about, because I'm so close to him, I'm going to feel so sad. I'm going to be devastated when he dies, and living that grief and that loss in the present moment, which is not helpful. I mean, then I miss living with him fully at times, but also at times it's beautiful because it reminds me, I don't know how much time I have with him, and to be really present and to take advantage of it. But it's just funny how I think my brain tries to protect me from the loss in a way, like, oh, if I think about it now, maybe it won't hurt so bad. Like, I'm getting teared up thinking about it. It won't hurt so bad when he actually dies. Well, of course it's going to hurt and it's going to be painful. And I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know what that's going to look like. But yeah, it just reminds me how it's all my thinking, it's just all my thinking in the moment. And I can recognize it and let it go and just be present with him. So yeah, that's what came up for me when you were talking.
That's so beautiful, Susan. I'm so glad that you did share that, because I think all of us experience all of that. It's very natural and so good to be reminded of.
Yeah. And being in this conversation, then it reminds it brings it more to the front of my brain so I can see it for what it really is, you know? So I'm not just going through, it's not just happening to me, so to speak. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
I just wanted to say I'm really enjoying the spaces of silence that keeps happening, because I'm really feeling like in those spaces of silence, it just really gives us all just this chance to really hear everyone and to, I don't know, just sit in this present moment and just be really grateful. I'm really grateful for everyone, everything everyone said, our brother Matthew, our sister Susan. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Monique. I think silence is really important. And sometimes we're a little bit quick to fill the silence because we can start to feel a bit uncomfortable that there's nothing going on. It's something I have to often kind of stop myself for. And sometimes it takes people a moment before they can quite bring themselves to share. We had the experience last week. We were attending a funeral of a dear friend that had sadly passed away after a long experience with brain tumor. And when the person invited people to come and share, my husband told me afterwards he really wanted to, but she didn't offer the silence for him to step into. It wasn't long enough. And he really regretted that he hadn't gone and shared. And so I just try to be really mindful of that, because people need some space sometimes. Not everyone is as brave as some people. You know, sometimes it takes me a bit to work up to overcome the conditioning that's saying, don't talk. Be quiet about that. You're not important. Sometimes. And yet I also trust more now that who am I to judge what's important or not important? It could be that thing I say will resonate really strongly, even just for one person. And who am I to second guess? And I still do it.
Miss Susan really woke something up in me in regards to grief, and everyone who spoke about grief. I recently didn't get a promotion, which I've shared in different places, but I was really vying hard for the promotion. And it was funny the way grief worked with me not getting the promotion. So my baseline's pretty happy. And so I have a hard time with anger, because I don't know why I don't feel anger a lot. So I took a couple of days just to feel, to like create a space and see what I was feeling. And I felt my sadness for a day. And I felt mad one day. I felt mad. And so I was so happy I had a day to kind of just sit with anger and give it space and see what it sounded like. Like, it's not, everyone has a baseline. Like, I know for me, it doesn't take courage to talk, because my whole life they keep telling me to shut up. So, you know, I kind of try to be quiet so others can talk. But it was really nice to create a space and honor grief. Because sometimes when grief comes and sits with us, it really just wants its place to be honored and be able to feel. Because it's such an uncomfortable, you know, anger or whatever stage we're in the grieving process. But I think it's just beautiful to give it space. So that's what I hear everyone saying in regards to their grief, is that when it showed up, it was allowed.
Yeah. And it can even be enjoyed. I know that there's been times when I've been experiencing many tears about something, but the tears just feel right. the tears that I shed about Robert, that just felt beautiful. I wouldn't have those tears if I hadn't loved him. And yeah, I don't have to suffer. It's tears with no suffering. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. I've really enjoyed this exploration. And hopefully you guys have too. I think we pretty much have stuck around.